Burnout series, talking about burnout every morning in this month of Mental Health Awareness Month. And today we're talking about the impact of change and uncertainty on burnout and that relationship between the two. I was reading a book by Octavia Butler, and there's a quote that says, "All that you touch, you change. All you change changes you. And the only lasting truth is change." And one of the reasons why I wanted to start with that is that I've realized that part of change is a fear of the unknown or a fear of something. So, for example, in this case, the fear of change, like the fear of failure or success sometimes, can lead to stress, anxiety, and resistance to adapt in new circumstances. But that's what you change, right? The fear, on the other hand, the fear of things you can't control, such as external events, circumstances beyond your control, can create sense of helplessness, right? Frustration and overwhelm, and that's what changes you. Like, you don't have control over it; it changes you. But the only lasting truth is change. Change is inevitable. Like, we've seen that over the past decade or so. Things like the pandemic, we don't have control over. We don't orchestrate those scenarios, but we kind of live through it. Redundancies. There might be things that you hope for that don't happen, or things that you don't want to happen that do. Like, things change. Like, even our age, we grow older, and physiologically we change. The way we look at things change. Whenever we're reading a book or having a new experience, there's something that changes within us. I was having a conversation yesterday about the idea of different versions of you, and one guy was going through quantum explanations of this. But what I said is, basically, if you think about the idea of the multiverse, there is a different version of you for different decisions that you made in life. So, for example, that decision to go to one uni over another will create a different version of me. That decision to choose this job over another will create a different version of me. That decision to face or walk away from a challenge will create a different version of me. And everything that I do as a result, and how I handle that, what I think about, how I construct myself after an event, will change me in some way. Something about me will change, whether it's the view I have of the world, whether it's what the view I have of myself, it will change. So the question is, what changes have happened in your life, and how have you managed them that have led to the person that you are right now, and your capacity for change? Because if we have a very small capacity for change with a large certainty that change will come, you'll find it very difficult to manage that change when it does arrive. Not if, but when it does arrive. And not being able to manage that change can add towards your acceleration towards burnout. And when these fears, like I mentioned, aren't managed effectively, they can lead to burnout, increased feelings of uncertainty, insecurity, and lack of control. And we all know, like, when you don't know, it's like being a passenger in a car. It's strange. When you're in the driver's seat and you're in control of the vehicle, you feel a lot safer than when you're in the passenger seat and they make a sudden movement, right? So it's about being in control, but not being in control. Both of you, whether you're in the passenger seat or in the driver's seat, or on a road and have to experience change if someone in front of you slams on the brakes. Both of you experience that, but in different ways, right? So today I'm talking about the five keys to managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty. Number one is acknowledging and accepting your emotions. We can't control the external circumstances. Like, with CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, your beliefs shape your thoughts shape your action, shape your emotions shape your actions. But then everything that happens after your actions is something you can't control. You can't control the circumstances that you're in a lot of the time, but you can control how you respond to them. So recognizing and accepting the emotions that happen, not demonizing them, not trying to shun them away, not trying to paste over them with happiness, but accepting and acknowledging your emotions. Okay, I'm feeling this right now. This change has happened, and this is what's going through my body, right? There's fear there. There is sadness. There is anger. There's rage. There is disappointment. There is hurt. That there is whatever it is, acknowledging and accepting your emotion when things change is really important. And it can arise in times of change in any kind of way, shape, or form. You might be familiar with these. It might be fear, anxiety. Well, allow yourself to feel. When I was doing the sessions on burnout on LinkedIn, one of the episodes was about emotional exhaustion, the idea of feeling for too long, too much for too long, and you get to the point where you run out of your capacity to feel. That's how I described it. You're on an empty tank in terms of emotions. Allow yourself to feel and process the emotions without judgment. Without judgment is so. If you can't on something, if you say I shouldn't be feeling that, if you engage in emotional or trauma Olympics and say, okay, I'm going through this, but some people in the world are going through much worse, and so I shouldn't feel like this, then you're never going to face what you actually feel. You are a human, you are experiencing things, and you have emotions. Like, just because other people have emotions too, or other people go through something that you consider to be worse or better, doesn't mean that you're not going through something. And the worst thing we can do is avoid emotions. And I feel like a lot of us do this. We start to move into our logical brain. Okay, other people are thinking this or feeling this or experiencing this, so I shouldn't be thinking this or experiencing it. Okay, some person's event is a mountain a mile, mine is a molehill. Who's to say? Um, you know, all these kind of things, all kinds of things we can talk ourselves basically out of feeling, which robs us of our ability to address the feelings, because the feelings aren't going to go anywhere. They're going to stay. It's like casting dust under a rug in a room, instead of taking it outside of the house. That rug is just going to end up sitting on top of a pile, and you know what happens? You see that pile grow. You may not notice it initially, but it will be in the corner of your eye. You can see that lump in the carpet go higher and higher and higher and higher until the carpet is sitting on top of that stuff that you just try and sweep under it. And then when your friends and family come to visit, they'll see it in plain sight, and you've been trying to ignore it so much that you get them to sit around this rug like it's not sitting 6 foot in the air. This analogy is really random, but you get what I'm saying, right? And it's a good illustration because we often do that to ourselves. It's like, when we have small changes, we ourselves don't notice. It's like when we gain or lose weight in the day by day, we don't notice the difference. It's only when we speak to someone after a year or something, they're like, whoa, you're completely different, that we realize, oh, there has been actual change. That can be positive and negative. Since we're talking about burnout, we're looking at what happens when we don't manage our emotions, for example, which is, number one, is the key of managing burnout in times of change, is acknowledging, accepting those emotions. Number two, in terms of second key to managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty, is practicing self-compassion. Now, I've talked about this a lot. We do not treat ourselves with the same compassion that we treat our friends and family who are going through the same thing we are. And it's interesting because, like, especially if you're a giver or someone who people turn to for help, you could be experiencing the same thing that someone else has. So, for example, you'll see in a family where everyone is experiencing grief, where the person who people always turn to decides they need to be hard, they need to be strong for everybody else. And so they don't allow themselves the same um, grace, compassion that they allow everybody else, because they feel the need, or they've decided that they are the one to carry the need, the shoulders, the weight of everybody. And so they'll be the ones where, and when everyone's breaking down, they go to them and say, oh, it's okay, we're going to get through this, all that kind of stuff. And that person is crying, and so, okay, what do you need? How can I be there for you? But they won't accept the same. And even worse, because they've been created this environment where they are the only person who people come to in the space, other people don't even think that they need help, because they've always been in that position of strength. And I say strength in captions because strength is an idea. It's subjective, and it's also, if you think about strength, I can't remember what exactly the quote was, but they pointed out that hardness without softness is brittle, which means it will break. It may not bend, but it will absolutely break. And I feel like that's what happens when we try and be strong, when we try and show strength in one way, and realize that vulnerability is part of strength as well. And we have to show compassion to ourselves to experience that. Be kind and compassionate towards yourself during those times. Treat yourself with the same understanding and support that you would with a friend facing the same circumstances, like I said, right? You're deserving of that just as much as anyone else is. Okay. So the third key for managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty is staying flexible and being able to adapt. I said before, the problem with strength without softness, hardness without softness, is that it doesn't bend, but it breaks. Staying flexible means that you allow yourself for change to happen, knowing that, okay, if I'm going this way and there is an obstacle here, it doesn't matter what happens or how I get around it, as long as I'm still going in that direction. Being able to adapt. Okay, this isn't working, so we need to try something else. And that can happen in terms of our healing as well. I've tried these things aren't working. What else can I try? Instead of I tried this and so healing doesn't work for me. That's not how it works, right? So staying flexible is so important. Embrace that flexibility and adaptability as well. Um, it's important to be willing to adapt. So what happens a lot of the time is that they decide that no, I am not going to change to this. This has to be this way. You've written a script in your mind, and when that script goes up in flames, you go into denial and you say to yourself, no, I have to do it this way, even if the evidence is showing otherwise. That is absolutely going to send you towards burnout, because then you're fighting something that will not change, right? Sometimes we have to be flexible. And there is an element of, and this is something I experienced as well, there's an element of grief involved in that, right? Being flexible, letting go. Because if you hold on to something for too long, it means that you won't be able to hold on to anything else that might serve you even better. There is I don't know if you've seen this experiment where there's a jar in the forest and there is a box of sugar in it, like a little cube of sugar. And if anyone who's wanting to try and find water in this area uses this trick, right? So you get the jar, have sugar in it, and I think it was like a monkey or baboon or something would want the sugar, and so they'll try and get the sugar. They'll put their hand in the jar and they'll hold it, right? And they will try and remove uh, their hand, but because, forget the water thing, because the hand is around the sugar, the circumference is wider than the neck of the jar, which means they can't pull their hand out. And while they're struggling with this back and forth, the person to capture them just takes the monkey, because they won't let go of the sugar, right? And it's such a simple analogy, but I feel like we experience that all the way through our lives. There'll be something that has worked for you before that you can't let go of. But because you can't let go of that, then you can't get hold of something new, something different, something that could or whatever benefit you in the future. And so we lose out on that, and there's grief involved, right? One of the ways I described it to someone is, I remember leaving a relationship, and I said to her that the breakup itself wasn't what was finishing me. It was more the loss of what I thought we were going to be. But me holding on to that idea would mean that I wouldn't have space or be able to accommodate someone new in my life, right? So when it comes to these staying flexible, it's really important, because we have to be willing to adjust our plans. willing to adjust our expectations, willing to adjust the routines that we need to navigate our times. Expectations are really important. There's a book called Solve for Happy, as solve as in to solve a solution for happy. So it's the equation for happiness that you're trying to find. And it's written by a guy called Mo Gaudat, who you might have seen on Diary of a CEO, for example, as one of the guests. And he talks about this equation being really simple. This is your reality. And if your expectation of how life should be is above your reality, you'll be unhappy. If your expectation of how life should be is below your reality, you'll be happy. Unhappiness happens when you expect life to treat you a certain way that it doesn't. Happiness happens when you actually expect life not to treat you in that way, but it does. And so we have to sometimes we have to manage our expectations and be like, okay, if I don't get this, I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to be able to find another solution. I can change, I can adapt. Allowing yourself to do that is really important. I mentioned about the growth mindset as an element of managing burnout before, and this is an element of it too. One second, let me make sure I am okay. And this is an aspect of it too. Okay, so we're talking about 5 keys to managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty. Number 1 is acknowledging and accepting your emotions. Number 2 is practicing self-compassion. Number 3 is staying flexible and adapt. Number 4 is seeking support and connection. Now, I'm sure at this point you've seen a trend. I've been talking for how many days now? 26 days consistently about the impact of different things on burnout, and connection and support has been a running theme in all of this. One of the things we do when we're experiencing burnout is we isolate ourselves, which is the worst thing that we can do. We need change as humans. A problem shared is a problem halved if you're sharing it with the right people. So I've talked about the idea of building those relationships with the right people. I've talked about trust and vulnerability to be able to do that. I've talked about the idea of going to them and accepting or understanding where this idea that you can't approach people comes from. It might be from experiences, it might be from beliefs that you've managed or created in your history, and going to the root of that to be able to love again, to connect again, to trust again. So, because we need that to be able to build relationships that are deep and meaningful and safe. And only when we have safe relationships can we go to those spaces and have those spaces held for us, which will help us get out of burnout. If you're hurtling towards burnout already, you don't want to go into a space where you feel like you're not going to be held, when you don't feel safe, because that's going to make it even worse. So, of course, you're going to isolate yourself. But then what also happens is we work really hard to create these environments and then we don't use them. So it's important when those things happen for us to really navigate or understand why we don't, because it's going to hurt us in the end. We need to reach out to our friends, our family, our mental health professionals, our coaches, our therapists, and get that support when we're experiencing burnout. We need to stay connected to our support network. We've built it over time. Sometimes we may not even realize we've been building it, but pay attention to the people who are there for you for the little things, and sometimes the ones who are there for you for the big things, right? Sometimes they may not be the same person for both. Different people have different capacity, but being mindful and paying attention to, how does this person hold space for me? How do I feel in that person's presence? What kind of information can I bring to them that they're really good at dealing with? Can I come to them and just talk and get things off my chest, and they don't need a solution based conversation? Can I just unload in this space and they're able to manage it, and we can both walk away healthier, and they don't take the burden on as their own? How can I, in what spaces do I go to when I need a solution and I need action points and I need accountability to be able to do something, right? If I say I'm going to eat well, I'm going to have 3 meals a day because I know it affects me when I don't eat, because it gives me headaches and it gives me short attention span and it makes me irritable, then I'm going to come to this person because they're going to keep me accountable to this thing. And I know that if I continue to sleep well, eat well, hydrate myself well, have enough exercise, then it'll help me towards recovering from burnout. Even if I don't feel like it at the moment, I always feel better afterwards, right? So maintain connection. Sometimes we can't do it by ourselves. We can't be expected to do everything on our ones. Yeah, reach out to the people who you've invested in. So number five in terms of the fifth key to managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty is focusing on what you can control. I started with a quote that I'm going to end with. All that you change, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. Octavia Butler. Focus on what you can control. Change is going to happen inevitably. It's always going to happen. But the question is, what can you control and what can't you control? Trying to change the things you can't control is going to lead you towards burnout. I'll give you an example. I can control what I say, but I can't control how people react to what I say. But what I can do is I can adjust what I say next based on how they reacted to what I just said. Make sense? I can take a horse to water, but I can't make it drink, right? It's acknowledging, having the wisdom to understand what you can and can't change, letting go of the things you can't change and just focusing on the things you can. I know I can't change someone's how someone feels about me. I can't change that. But what I can do is I can change myself and I can approach them differently. And over time, they may change, but I don't have control over that. But I can influence that by what I can control, which is me, myself, my thoughts, my emotions, my actions. That I can control. Right. So focus on that. Shift your focus towards aspects of your life that you can control, right? And these are things like self-care practices, boundaries, right, for yourself and other people, self-compassion, like I mentioned before. But letting go is so important. One of the things that I saw recently is the idea of forgiveness. Forgiveness is for you, not the other person, right? You can't control what they did because it's in the past. It has happened. The past is quite literally something you can't control. And in some aspects, the future as well. You're not in the future yet. All you can control is what's happening right now, but it can influence the future, right? But we overthink a lot of the time. We have regret. We have suffering because we keep going over things in our head, and there's nothing we can do about them now. They say pain is felt in the body, suffering is felt in the mind. So if, for example, I made a mistake 15 years ago and I'm still bringing it up, that can lead me towards burnout as well, because there's nothing I can do about it now. I can't wake up one morning and be like, oh, okay, it has changed, because it won't. It's already happened. So the question is, what can I change? What I can change is my mindset. I can change my beliefs. I can change what it means to me, right? If, for example, I lost my job, that happened. But what I can change is how I look at it. Was it an opportunity, or is it the end of my life? And so now my life is over. Oh, you can change your mind. You can change what you do next. I can change my mindset as thinking of it as an opportunity. And now I can change my actions. I can say to myself, I'm going to find another job, one that's even better than the one that was there before, one with even more fulfillment, one with even more pay, one that I love even more, one with even better people in my team, right? So the idea is focusing on what you can change, because then you can actually do something about it. And then leave the rest up to God, leave the rest up to the world. Like that part you don't have control over. There's a line between what you can and can't change. There's wisdom in finding out where that line is. So let go of the need to control external factors and instead channel your energy towards nurturing your well-being and what you can control. Okay. So I'm just going to recap today. It was the 5 keys to managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty. Number 1, the first key is acknowledging and accepting your emotions. The second key is practicing self-compassion towards yourself. The third key is staying flexible and adapting. The fourth key is seeking support and connection. The fifth key is focusing on what you can and can't control. And those are the 5 keys of managing burnout in times of change and uncertainty. Now, one of the things is I've given you these 5 keys, right? But I'm going to be real with you. The 5 keys, unknowing what they are, is only the first step. I'm going to give you an example. You know that seeking support and connection is what you need. The next question is, how are you going to get that? Some of you might be experiencing trauma from past relationships that haven't gone the way you wanted. And so trusting again could be a really big issue for you. You might have built walls up around you. You call them boundaries, but they're actually fortresses, right? No one can come in, but also no one can come out. So then you find yourself alone in that space. How do you even approach that in terms of finding connection in that circumstance? I've talked about self-compassion, but you're in the depths of it right now. You're experiencing depression. You're experiencing rejection. You're experiencing abandonment, right? And you're experiencing all these things, and these are loading on. How do you be self-compassionate towards yourself in that situation? How do you be kind to yourself when you don't feel like you deserve it? When you're experiencing guilt, when you're experiencing shame, right? How do you change the way you treat yourself when you feel like you're at the lowest of the low, right? How do you identify what you can and can't control? How do you acknowledge your emotions when you're scared of what it might mean, right? When you don't understand what it might mean, when it's an emotion that's new to you and you're not sure how to manage that. How do you do that? That's where I come in. In those scenarios where you're really struggling to, you know what to do, but you're struggling to do it because information is not the thing right now. You can Google all the stuff I've said, look online and watch the podcast and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, the reason why we need professional help a lot of the time is because it's not what to do that is the problem. It's the doing it that is the issue, right? And in this case, our role as professionals is to help you do that. It's to help you by hand, is to help you navigate, right? The way I describe it is that uh, like a coach or a therapist, for example, is your guide. They're your Yoda. They don't do the work for you. They just show you how to use the force. They show you, they point out what the challenges are, but it's up to you to go to the beast and slay the whatever it is, right? Um, the reason why I'm saying this is because I know how much people are struggling, and people can't. You may not be able to understand why you keep finding these patterns, why you keep finding yourself here, why you're struggling with this. Oh, this is such a small issue. Why is it so big to me? Maybe it's because of your belief systems and things that have happened to you in the past that you've internalized that you haven't realized you haven't dealt with yet. These are all elements of why we find it difficult to shift past the things that are blocking us. And if you need help with that, this is where I come in. And QR code here. This is where you book a session with me. Just 30 minutes. We'll talk. There's a few questions that you can answer, and we'll just talk about them briefly. Okay. It's just a 30-minute talk. You don't have to commit to anything, but we'll try and get to the bottom of what's actually going on and find out what's the deal for you individually. If you're on Instagram, just DM me and I'll send you the link. In that 30 minutes, we'll try and figure out what's at the root that's holding you back. What is the challenge that you're really facing? What is the challenge you're really facing? Not the one at the surface that you're trying to tell yourself to appease yourself, but what is the challenge you're really facing at the heart of it? And then if you need a session for us to actually work through it and find a solution for you, then we can do that. If it means being a regular client, then we can do that. I also offer programs, then we can do that. But the idea is speaking to someone. And I encourage you to do it soon. Don't wait. The other thing about change that is funny, not funny, haha, unfortunately, but funny as in it's just the way it is that we often think about the pain of change. Okay, so change is going to have some kind of pain when you're actually doing the change. But the thing is, after the change, then you're good. The problem with not doing the change is it extends the pain through history. So if you don't change, you stay in pain. And there's actually a pain of staying the same as well as the pain of actual change. But the pain of change is shorter. The pain of staying the same is eternal. You experience that for your life. So if you're experiencing pain, and I say pain in all kinds of different ways, it can just be discomfort, unfulfillment. It can be sadness. It can be grief. If you're experiencing that and you're putting off what you need to be on the other side of that pain, then it means that you're staying it forever. And sometimes we need professional help to be able to help us over that hill. Get in touch. Don't wait. And I'll see you tomorrow for another episode of